evening from New York. In both the small and big picture, it represents the breakdown of government, a knowing, hands-off, recklessly minimalist approach, an a la carte system that openly invites specific destruction in the short term and the deconstruction of basic governmental services in the long term. In our fifth story, the home that was allowed to burn to the ground over a $75 fee not paid, now drawing the cheers of some conservatives eager to defend the policy and blame the victims. With local county authorities evidently unmoved by this, the home of Jean and Paulette Cranick burning as firefighters watched because the Cranicks had failed to pay their $75 subscription fee. But last night, the Olbermann County Budget Committee of Tennessee chose to expand the subscription-only fire service, pay to spray. The decision was 2 years in the making and will not go into effect immediately, but also not changed by recent events. Meantime, the Prince of Too Bad for You, as well as other conservatives, happily defending the system and explaining how that system worked exactly as intended.
If you don't pay your $75, then that hurts the fire department. They can't use those resources, and you would be sponging off of your neighbor's $75 if they put out your neighbor's house and you didn't pay for it. I mean, if your neighbor didn't pay for it, you did, and they put out their house, your neighbor is sponging off of your $75.
And as soon as they put out the fire of somebody who didn't pay the $75, no one will pay the $75.
Why would you?
Which, if true, is why government services should never be constructed to put people in these situations in the first place. Not the homeowner, nor the firefighter. But back to the "they got what they deserve" chorus. The National Review's online blog and Daniel Foster quoting, "I have no problem with this kind of opt-in government in principle, but forget the politics. What moral theory allows these firefighters, admittedly acting under orders, to watch this house burn to the ground? Good for you." And that was the compassionate entry. "Dan, you are 100% wrong," responded Kevin Williamson. "The world is full of jerks, freeloaders, and ingrates, and the problems they create for themselves are their own." The National Review's Jonah Goldberg sadly noting how well the system works, quoting, "Here's the more important part of the story. Letting the house burn, while I admit sad, will probably save more houses over the long haul. I know that if I opted out of the program before, I would be more likely to opt in now." No, that is not the important part of the story. Indeed, when a fire chief within Olbermann County was asked about the County Budget Committee's decision to expand pay to spray, he was at first diplomatic and then frank.
I think it'll be really effective. It's not the best solution. Without a doubt, the best option is a true fire tax. It eliminates this having 911 or whoever to check to say, are they covered or not covered? And the last thing a firefighter wants to do is not be able to help when they'd like to.
And what about the fire department's proposal, the one that, in trying to achieve a local government solution, tells the larger story about what government should be doing to protect its citizens? The Olbermann County Fire Department's 37-page presentation to establish countywide fire protection. The very proposal considered by those budgetary functionary authorities before they decided to expand pay to spray. Page 5 of the fire department proposal, purpose: to formally establish a countywide fire department which will provide quality fire protection and emergency response to all areas of Olbermann County in a timely manner with no subscription fees or requirements for response. Page 4, overview: no other emergency agency responds solely on a subscription basis, ability to pay basis, or under the threat of not responding if you don't pay your bill. Page 6, explanation: it is becoming more difficult to convince municipal leaders that the municipal fire departments responding to calls outside the municipal boundaries and for which no compensation is guaranteed is just the right thing to do. The fire department presented 5 different funding solutions, including one which would increase property taxes slightly for all residents, or one that would increase the monthly electric bills by $3. Also presented a countywide subscription fee of $116 per household for those rural homeowners living outside the municipalities. Join me now once more from outside where his home was, Gene Cranick. And Mr. Cranick, we thank you again for your time tonight. I know it's hard to believe that people could be that cold, but they are. How do you respond to those people who are saying today that you got what you deserved somehow?
Well, I respond to those people like this. Wait till the shoe's on the other foot, on their foot, and see what happens. It happens to anybody. I don't care. You forget things. And I did. I'll suffer the consequences for it. So I'm not a freeloader. I worked all my life for everything I got. And so, and another thing about it, they have waived these fire fees before. They waived them up here at my son's house, and 3 years ago in December, they waived them at over on another road over here in out of town, and saved the guy's house. But I know they've waived them before, so therefore they could have waived mine, and I would have paid it. My neighbor offered to pay them. I don't know, it was $500 or $5,000 to spray the house down and put it out. But no, they sprayed the fence row.
My understanding is that you've heard about some of the coverage on some of the other cable networks today about this, people who said that it doesn't matter, that rule has to be enforced. What do you think about that point of view, the coverage on Fox News, for instance?
Well, I say to those people that they don't know the whole story about everything, and they shouldn't be judging people when they don't know what they're talking about.
The idea that that this has to, if they had somehow gone in and put out the fire without you having paid, that would hurt the system, that would punish all the people that did pay. Does that make any sense to you?
No, it don't, because I would have paid. I offered to pay. I told them I'd pay whatever it took.
From what we're gathering from looking into this today, it looks like the firefighters do not like this system. The politicians apparently like this system. How do you respond to that disagreement between those two parties?
Well, I don't know, but I did understand that the man that was calling the shots on this fire and told them not to put no water on it was then within a half a mile of playing golf. He was playing golf right down here on the golf course within a half a mile. That really tells you that they really care. No wonder we can't get any industry and anything in this little old town around. So why should I want to put up a business or build a new home around when they're not going to do that? They're not going to do you, treat you right. And another thing is, and I don't know whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. I hadn't researched it yet. But part of my tax dollars comes back to this town, I think, for fire trucks. And the first one thing that goes in the general fund, they don't just use it for fire trucks or the police department or whatever. And I know for a fact that they take their prisoners. When they take the prisoners, they built this new thing up here, about $3.5 million. And I understood they're supposed to have a jail in it. But they don't. They take all their prisoners over to the county, over at Union City, to the county. So what do they even need all that up there for? They're not going to use it.
That they could afford, but your $75 they could not afford. Let me ask you this. Let me just see if there's something a little nicer to this story than we've told everybody about, and I know you're living it and none of it's nice for you, but what's the reaction of your neighbors to this? I mean, you mentioned your neighbor was willing to pay on the spot as you were as this fire was going on. Has it generally been compassionate and neighborly?
Most everybody has been compassionate and neighborly, and I talked to a guy from the city today. He lives up in the city. And he said he hated it, but that was their rule up there. But he hated it that it happened, and the way it happened and everything. He hated it. I understood some of the firefighters went home and was sick.
Yep.
Some of them even cried over it. I appreciate it.
Well, let me ask you one more, and then we'll let you go again with our thanks. What's next for you and the family?
Right now, I don't know. We haven't talked. We've got to wait till our insurance company comes around and says it's all right to clean up and everything, and then we'll clean up and we'll go from there. Whether we bill back now or later, we'll just have to make a decision later on this.
All right.
So we may not bill back, and then again we may bill something. I don't have any idea.
All right. we'll be in touch with you if we have your permission to do so. And again, in the interim,
yes.
Thanks for your time and our continued best wishes in this terrible situation.
All right.
Gene Cranick, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cranick's story has resonated nationally, culturally, in a way he could not have foreseen, nor truly could we have predicted the huge reaction. About that, let's bring in the Washington editor of The Nation, MSNBC contributor Chris Hayes. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Keith.
Before we get to Beck and the I say let 'em crash crowd, what is resonating here and why is it resonating?
I think it's resonating because it's sort of the reductio ad absurdum of the entirety of the kind of Tea Party, John Galt, you're on your own agenda. I mean, the idea that every single last thing is a matter of individuals. Margaret Thatcher famously said there's no such thing as society, there's just individuals, and that there are no public goods, there is no sort of social solidarity, there's nothing, absolutely nothing that we do collectively as a society that we sort of mutually agree to, that we bind each other to through the form of government, through paying taxes and receiving public services. The extremism of a view that refutes that, which is instantiated in the policy in this county, is when you're faced with the consequences of it is so morally abhorrent that I think it does resonate, because it's a picture of what a certain section of the political spectrum is trying to drive us towards.
All right, Beck and the crowd from the National Review, who for the most part, with the exception of Dan Foster to some degree, who I think gets a little check mark next to his name for expressing sort of the human point of view on this as opposed to the robot viewpoint or the Ayn Rand viewpoint, they were all focusing on how well the system worked instead of questioning the whole system itself, weren't they?
Right, exactly. I mean, that was so interesting, right? You're talking about this moral hazard problem. The point is that, as you said in the beginning, this is why you do not structure these services in this way. And in fact, in a sort of interesting way, right, it's sort of an argument for single-payer health care. I mean, the whole argument Michael Moore makes in his film Sicko is that we have single-payer firefighting. And the reason we have single-payer firefighting is exactly to avoid this kind of situation. We all pay our taxes. We all receive this universal benefit. And there's tremendous amount of political science literature and sort of comparative political economy that shows that these are the kinds of structures that are most efficient, that work best. So Social Security is the same thing. We all pay in, we all universally receive the benefit. When you look at the healthcare bill, right, it makes you wonder about how we would design a fire department today in the face of kind of right-wing obstruction and corporate interest, because the healthcare bill is basically mandatory insurance, right? It requires everyone to buy the equivalent of fire insurance, and it sanctions them if they don't, as opposed to just having this neat and somewhat simple and efficient single-payer system.
We did, by the way, in many parts of this country, try firefighting by subscription, and one of the results, I believe, about 1770 or so was the New York burn down. Not really a big sort of Chicago fire. It was a smaller town at that point. I may have the year wrong by quite a lot, but just to indicate, we did try this before and proved
there were badges. There were badges on the buildings.
On the buildings, yes, excellent. And then otherwise, you let it go up in smoke, and then they realized that really doesn't work long term if you have any buildings within, say, a half mile of the fire. All right, but we have here ideological people for whom empirical results like that mean nothing. Would Beck have been saying the same thing if people had been injured in this fire or killed? I mean, do we know that the on-demand fire department would not have stood back and let people been injured or killed? Isn't theoretically that part of this equation? I mean, do we know they wouldn't have stopped it if, the 5 adjoining homes didn't subscribe and a square mile of Tennessee went up in flames as a result?
No, absolutely. And I mean, moral hazard is moral hazard, right? So if you really want to bring the hammer down, if you really want to disincentivize not paying your $75, nothing would do that like a bunch of third-degree burns or, Lord forbid, a casualty in the family, right? I mean, that would really, to use Jonah Goldberg's logic, right, you'd really think twice about not paying the $75. The whole point is that it shouldn't be an opt-in subscription service. I mean, and you can imagine extending this to all sorts of things. I mean, blessedly, we have rules that hospital emergency rooms have to take patients, but one can imagine punitive measures being undertaken by certain right-wing state legislatures to try to repeal that, right, to check that people are, up on their taxes, for instance, or have paid all their bills, or check the credit rating of people that got dropped off at the emergency room with a bullet to the chest. I mean, what you're seeing here are two things. One is a kind of ideological commitment to this principle that there is no public sector, there are no public goods. The other is, I think, a more kind of dispositional affect that's really part of conservatism going very far back and manifest in the Tea Party, which just a sheer punitive kind of contempt in the face of suffering. I mean, Kevin Williams Williamson calling people ingrates and losers and jerks, that runs through the whole kind of Ayn Rand Galtian framework, and you see it in all the Rick Santelli rants and the Tea Party talk about sponges and moochers. It's this contempt for people as opposed to just sort of basic human compassion.
Yeah, 2 points. As Mr. Cranick pointed out, didn't some of his taxes go to the fire engines? And number two, let me say this, but I haven't had the opportunity before. Atlas Shrugged, piece of crap. Chris Hayes, the Washington editor of The Nation. Thank you, Chris.
That's a Twitter-length review right there.
And all it needs. Thank you much, my friend.
Thank you, Keith.
One quick note, we have been inundated with offers of help from you for the Cranicks. We've spoken with Mr. Cranick about this off the air. He's very touched. As you heard him say, he wants to talk about it with his family. He has to assess the insurance situation. He will keep us posted, and we will keep you posted. And thank you kindly for the thought. Robert Reich on the little terrifying snapshot of a Tea Party America supplied to us by one tiny story in Obion County, Tennessee. Next.